Today we're going to multiply and divide rational expressions. So remember, rational expressions are just fractions or the quotient of two polynomials. So we have variables in the top and the bottom. We are going to multiply and divide just like we do with regular fractions. So we're going to multiply straight across the top, straight across the bottom. We can cross simplify when necessary, and then we're always going to state our excluded values as well. So here's an example. These are just monomials. All four of them are monomials. So I think it's easiest to just multiply straight across the top and straight across the bottom. So I did that. Remember, when you multiply, you're going to multiply variables. You're going to add their exponents. So we'd have a 60, a to the third and b to the fourth over 18, a and b to the fifth. Then I simplify my coefficients. So 60 and 18, you can take a 6 out of, leaving you with a 10 and a 3. So that's the only thing I did in this step. And then I'm going to use that quotient rule to simplify my variables. So I'd have an a squared on the top and a b on the denominator. And then don't forget to state those excluded values. In this case, a and b just cannot equal 0. So here we have a little more complicated one. However, we're going to do a lot of what we just did in our last lesson. So we're going to start by factoring out what we can from these binomials and then factoring these trinomials. So you can take a 3x out of here. X squared minus 9 factors to be x plus 3x minus 3. And there's how those two trinomials factor. I want to know, a lot of people are going to cancel off these x minus 5s, and then they're going to try to cancel off these x minus 5s. Notice this is not actually x minus 5. We can make it that way, so I made a little note. 5 minus x, if we factor out a -1 from both of them, we'll get a negative sign out front, and then that would change to a -5 plus x. And of course, now we can rearrange this inside of our parentheses to say x minus 5. But we have to have that negative out in front for it to be equivalent. So I went ahead and applied that negative in front of our 3x. And now my x minus 5s will all cancel. There's 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom. All of those will cancel, as well as my x minus 3s. So what I'm left with is a -3x over x plus 3. And then remember, you get your excluded values from your original factor step. So right here is where we're going to find our excluded values, and it's all of those denominator values. So x can't be -3, +3, or +5. So just like when we divide regular fractions, when we divide rational expressions, same rule applies. So instead of dividing, we multiply by the reciprocal. So here's a problem. There's multiplication and division in it. So I'm going to start by factoring. I did factor. So I'm going to start by factoring, and then notice I changed this division to a multiplication, and I multiplied by the reciprocal. You always multiply by the reciprocal of what comes after our sign. Okay, so divided by this piece is what we change with the reciprocal. Okay, so factored the denominator here, took out a 2x from this term. Then I canceled my x plus 5s and my x minus 3s. And then I also did 45 divided by 5, which is where I got this 9. Okay, so the x plus 5 and the x minus 3s are gone. That leaves me with a 2x and then an x squared y on the denominator. Because remember, 45 divided by 5 is where I got that 9. And now I just simplify from here. 9 times 2 gives me 18. These x's will cancel. I'll have an x on the bottom, and that y stays on the bottom. Then you have to state your excluded values. So we get those from here. We know x can't be -5, +3, 0, and y cannot be 0 either. I'd like you guys to take a minute and divide this expression.